This is Dr. Bev Knox, and you are listening to my psychology tutorials. Learn psychology while you sleep. What is cognitive psychology? Cognitive psychology is the branch of psychology concerned with the scientific study of the mind. What is the mind? One way to approach the question, quote unquote, what is the mind, is to consider how mind is used in everyday conversation. Here are a few examples. 1. He was able to call to mind what he was doing on the first day of the accident. The mind was involved in memory. 2. If you put your mind to it, I'm sure you can solve that math problem. The mind as a problem solver. 3. I haven't made up my mind yet, or I'm of two minds about this. The mind was used to make decisions or consider possibilities. 4. He is of sound mind and body, or when he talks about his encounter with aliens, it sounds like he's out of his mind. A healthy mind being associated with normal functioning, a non-functioning mind with abnormal functioning. 5. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. The mind as valuable, something that should be used. 6. He has a brilliant mind. It's used to describe people who are particularly intelligent or creative. These statements tell us some important things about what the mind is. The mind creates and controls mental functions such as perception, attention, memory, emotions, language, deciding, thinking, and reasoning. The definition reflects the mind's central role in determining our various mental abilities. Early work in cognitive psychology. In the 1800s, ideas about the mind were dominated by the belief that it is not possible to study the mind. One reason given was that it was not possible for the mind to study itself. But there were other reasons as well, including the idea that the properties of the mind simply cannot be measured. Nonetheless, some researchers defied the common wisdom and decided to study the mind anyway. One of these people was Dutch psychologist Donders, who in 1868, 11 years before the founding of the first laboratory of scientific psychology, did one of the first experiments. It is important to note that the term cognitive psychology was not coined until 1967, but in the early experiments we are going to qualify as cognitive psychology experiments. Donders was interested in determining how long it takes for a person to make a decision. He determined this by measuring reaction time, how long it takes to respond to presentation of a stimulus. He measured choice reaction time by using two lights and asking his subjects to push the left button when they saw the left light go on and the right button when they saw the right light go on. Donders' experiment is important, both because it was one of the first cognitive psychology experiments and also because it illustrates something extremely significant about studying the mind. Mental responses, which is perceiving the light and deciding which button to push, cannot be measured directly, but must be inferred from behavior. The fact that mental responses cannot be measured directly but must be inferred by observing behavior is a principle that holds not only the Donders experiment but for all research in cognitive development. The decade of the 1950s is generally recognized as the beginning of the cognitive revolution, a shift in psychology from the behaviorist stimulus response relationships to an approach whose main thrust was to understand the operation of the mind. How do cognitive psychologists think about the complexity of the mind? How does this influence the questions they ask and the experiments they carry out? The answers to these questions may be different for different researchers and different types of problems, but we will consider two aspects of research that apply to cognitive psychologists in general. 1. How research progresses from one question to another. And 2, the role of models in cognitive psychology. Research in cognitive psychology, like research in science in general, begins with what is known about a problem. From that starting point, researchers ask questions, design experiments, and obtain and interpret results. These findings then become the basis for new questions, experiments, and results. We can thus think of the process of research in terms of the following: a trail in which one thinks and leads to another. As with many trails, there are places where it is necessary to choose one path or another. In terms of research, the pathway taken is determined by the questions that are asked. The biggest challenge of research is, therefore, not doing the experiments, but picking the right questions. To review what was stated earlier, cognitive psychology is the branch of psychology concerned with the scientific study of the mind. The mind creates and controls mental capacities such as perception, attention, and memory. It also creates representations of the world that enable us to function. Because the operation of the mind cannot be observed directly, its operation must be inferred from what we can measure, such as behavior or physiological responding. This is one of the basic principles of cognitive psychology.